One of the most brutal murders in British crime history happened exactly 25 years ago in Stockport. A small-time drug dealer was kidnapped, forced to drink petrol, and then set on fire inside his own Ford Orion. And while this was happening, his friend was tied and locked in the boot, trying to make 100 calls to save his life. Not just that, he begged them to save his friend by saying please 53 times in just 3 minutes. And while he was pleading, the operator was hearing the dealer's friend screaming in the background as he was being burned alive. So, who were these two targeted people? The even stranger part of this story is that their torture ended up exposing extreme police incompetence and corruption in Greater Manchester. It was the 20th of September, 1999, started like any other Monday for David Barnshaw. The 32-year-old father rolled out of bed, excited about his daughter's birthday party. He grabbed balloons from the corner shop, watched her tear through wrapping paper with pure joy, and took the family out for a celebratory meal. Just another dad making memories with his little girl. But David carried secrets that would destroy everything before the day ended. While his neighbors saw a devoted father, David lived two completely different lives. By day, he played the role perfectly. School runs, birthday parties, family dinners. By night, he moved through Stockport's drug scene like a man walking on thin ice. He wasn't some criminal mastermind or feared gang boss. David was small-time, selling pills and weed to friends who knew friends. The kind of dealer who thought he could dance between worlds without consequences. He was dead wrong. David's problems started long before that fatal September night. Money had always been tight, and dealing seemed like easy cash. His friends wanted product, their friends wanted more, and suddenly David found himself deeper in the game than he ever planned. The problem with easy money is that it disappears just as fast as it comes. David spent everything he made paying off old debts, never building the cushion he desperately needed. By 1999, he owed his supplier 15 bags. Might as well have been 150 bags the way his pockets were looking. The debt got heavier every week, and his supplier weren't known for patience. David needed one big score to clear it all, and maybe duck out the game for good. Then, someone dangled him a move, 100 thouers. To him, it looked like divine intervention. In truth, it was a death sentence. Anyone who knew the late 90-second rave scene understood 100 thou pills weren't no amateur hustle. That kind of weight meant serious players, serious money, and serious danger. David was about to swim with sharks. His connection to danger ran deeper than most people realized. David's best friend had been Chris Little, a name that still made hardened criminals nervous 5 years after his murder. Chris earned the nickname Devil Dog Mobster through sheer brutality. He orchestrated arson attacks that kept entire fire departments busy, sometimes 20 fires in a single night. The man was a walking nightmare for anyone who crossed him. That reputation made Chris plenty of enemies. One night in 1994, his Ford Granada stopped at traffic lights, and a shotgun blast ended his reign of terror. For David, being Chris Little's best friend was both a blessing and a curse. It gave him protection while Chris lived, but it also painted a permanent target on his back. Some debts follow you to the grave, and some friendships do too. After celebrating his daughter's birthday that Monday, David drove his black Ford Orion to the Moss Rose pub in Stockport. His friend John Barry, who was 37 years old at the time, came along for what should have been a routine night out. They were regulars at the Moss Rose, known faces who blended into the background chatter and cigarette smoke. Just two mates having a drink and talking shop. Everything changed when they headed to the toilets. A group of men waited by the entrance. They were positioned like sentries. No one could have mistaken them for pub troublemakers looking for a fight over spilled drinks. They were organized, patient, and ready. The moment David and John walked toward the toilets, the trap snapped shut. The men stormed at them. They dragged David and John straight through the pub entrance, while shocked patrons watched in frozen silence. Nobody dared to intervene. In Stockport's underworld, getting involved in someone else's business was a guaranteed way to become the next victim. Outside, a second car was waiting with its engine running. The attackers shoved David into the backseat of his own Ford Orion while John tried desperately to fight them off. A brutal punch to the face dropped John instantly, and they cable-tied his hands before throwing him into the boot like a sack of potatoes. Both cars roared into the night, carrying their victims toward a horror you cannot even imagine. Inside the boot, John Barry was panicking, but John was a survivor. Somehow, he managed to work his hands free enough to grab his mobile phone His fingers found the numbers in the darkness. 999. He made an emergency call that would haunt everyone who heard it. John's voice came through shaky and desperate. He pleaded with the operator to send help immediately. At first he tried to stay calm, explaining the kidnapping in measured tones. But as seconds ticked by and reality sank in, terror took over him. The call lasted exactly 3 minutes and 10 seconds. In that brief window, John said the word please 53 times. Can you believe it? This tells us how desperate he was because he knew death was hunting him. The operator could hear the escalating panic in his voice as he begged him to save them and told him that they were killing John and David. He told the operator that they were battering them, but the most haunting part of that recording was not John's pleading. It was the sound bleeding through from the back seat. David screams as his captors tortured him while the car sped through Stockport's dark streets. The Ford Orion finally screeched to a halt on a quiet road. The second car pulled ahead and stopped. It blocked any escape route. The attackers dragged David from the back seat, and what they did defies human comprehension. John, who was still trapped in the boot, heard everything. The sound of liquid splashing, the unmistakable smell of petrol seeping through the car's interior. Then came the whoosh of ignition. Flames erupted inside the car. Then John heard what he never thought he would. The screams of his friend, David. His screams pierced the night, which was cold and silent. The killers had designed a psychological warfare to terrorize anyone who might consider crossing them. The heat pressed against the boot as flames engulfed the car. John kicked desperately against the lid to save himself. Thankfully, it finally burst open, and he threw himself out into the night. He was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he had escaped the same fate as his friend. A few moments later, emergency crews found the Ford Orion, which was now burning on Welling Road. Firefighters battled the flames while police secured the scene, but they were already too late for David. His body was burned beyond recognition. Paramedics rushed John to the hospital for smoke inhalation and chest injuries. Police immediately placed him under armed guard and arranged witness protection. He had seen too much and survived too much. The same people who had murdered David wouldn't hesitate to finish the job. The autopsy revealed the full horror of David's final moments. Petrol hadn't just been poured over him, it had been forced down his throat, filling his stomach and lungs. His killers made him drink death before they lit the match. It was deliberate torture, designed to maximize suffering and send a message. Why kill David Barnshaw in such a brutal way? In the criminal underworld, reputation meant everything. A simple shooting would have been faster, cleaner, and less risky for everyone involved. But forcing a man to drink petrol before burning him alive inside his own car was a horrifying performance, designed to traumatize rivals and establish dominance. But the terrifying thing is that the killers were not finished. 24 hours after David Barnshaw died screaming in his burning Ford Orion, they proved just how untouchable they believed themselves to be. Forensic teams had barely begun their examination of the charred vehicle when flames erupted again, this time inside a secure police garage. Someone had broken into Greater Manchester Police's evidence facility and tried to torch the very car that could convict them. Just look at their audacity! The killers wanted to send the message that they could reach anywhere, even behind police walls. They did everything they could to destroy evidence, but fire crews arrived just in time to save the Ford Orion, even though the garage itself was gutted. The attack shocked the entire investigation team. If criminals could penetrate police security this easily, nowhere was safe. This was not some desperate last-minute panic. It was calculated psychological warfare, designed to show that these killers operated on a different level entirely. They had burned a man alive, then burned a police station. What would they do next? Months passed by as detectives chased shadows through Stockport's criminal underworld. They heard many rumors, many tips from pubs and back alleys, but didn't find any solid evidence. Finally, in May 2001, police made their move. 7 men were arrested and charged with David Barnshaw's murder. This was a sweep that seemed to promise justice at last. At the centre of it all stood Aaron Cogan. It was a name that was already famous in Greater Manchester's criminal circles. You see, back in 1996, Cogan had been acquitted for another murder, the shotgun killing of Chris Little, the devil dog mobster, who happened to be David's best friend. The same man who may have killed David's best friend was now accused of killing David himself. So, alongside Cogan, 6 other men faced charges. And these were the charges that would make this one of Greater Manchester's most significant gangland trials. The prosecution built its case around their star witness, John Barry, the man who had survived that night locked in the boot of death. Barry claimed he recognized Aaron Cogan's voice during the kidnapping. This placed him directly at the scene. That identification would become the cornerstone of the entire case. Police wrapped Barry in witness protection and prepared him to testify against some of the most dangerous men in Stockport. The stage was set for what promised to be the trial of the decade. The proceedings finally opened at Preston Crown Court in November 2002. Armed police convoys transported the defendants under heavy guard, while officers wielding MP5 carbines secured every entrance. Roads were blocked, metal detectors scanned everyone entering the building, and the courtroom itself almost became a fortress. But behind all that security theatre, the prosecution's case was already crumbling. See, defense lawyers immediately spotted the investigation's fatal flaw. Police had tunnel vision. They had locked onto these 7 defendants and ignored virtually every other lead. Even more damaging, a police informant named Martin Crew had warned officers that Jeffrey Fenson was planning to hand down a beating just days before David's murder. That tip should have sent detectives scrambling to investigate Fenson as a prime suspect. Instead, they filed it away and forgot about it. That decision would come back to haunt them. In fact, there was so much missing evidence that it was hard to ignore. A crucial intelligence document called Log 89 had mysteriously vanished. This file contained a list of people who might have wanted David Barnshaw dead. When the judge demanded to see it, the police claimed it had simply disappeared. Justice Henry Davey didn't buy their explanation for a second and openly accused them of concealing evidence. And then came the real bombshell. John Barry took the witness stand as the prosecution's star witness, the man whose testimony would send 7 alleged killers to prison for life. But under cross-examination, Barry made a confession that shocked the entire courtroom. He wasn't just an unlucky victim who happened to survive, he was a registered police informant. Even worse, he admitted that officers had coached him on what to say in court. The prosecution, defense, and judge all sat in stunned silence. None of them had been told about Barry's status as a police asset or the coaching sessions. The revelation undermined Barry's credibility, and it also revealed to the court that the entire investigation was corrupt from the ground up. If the star witness had been manipulated by police, how could anyone trust a word of his testimony? The corruption ran deeper into the police department than anyone imagined. 2 additional witnesses had provided confidential information to detectives, trusting that their identities would remain secret. Somehow, that information leaked directly into criminal hands. Both witnesses were immediately branded as grasses. This meant they now had a death sentence in the criminal world. Police scrambled to relocate them. They even paid £134,000 each to keep them alive and hidden. The taxpayers funded their new lives while the investigation team tried to figure out who had betrayed their own witnesses. The leak suggested that either police officers were feeding information to criminals, or their security was so pathetic that confidential files might as well have been posted on billboards. Either way, it was a disaster. The defense team tore into the investigation like wolves. A 133-page report that suggested alternative suspects had been deliberately withheld from the defense. When it finally surfaced, the first 8 pages were missing. These were the pages that likely contained the most damaging information about police failures. Detective Chief Inspector Kenny Caldwell found himself at the center of the storm. Justice Henry Davey directly accused Caldwell of outright lying to the court. Darren Shenton was another officer from the National Crime Squad who was accused of writing misleading reports to support the prosecution's case. You can only imagine what happened next. Police hadn't just failed to solve the case properly, they had actively sabotaged it through incompetence, corruption, and outright deception. They were so desperate for convictions that they had twisted evidence, coached witnesses, and hidden documents that might have pointed to the real killers. Justice Henry Davey decided that he had seen enough. He declared the investigation a case of misconduct and gross negligence by senior officers. The trial collapsed and sent all 7 defendants walking free. The final insult was that taxpayers footed the £5 million bill for this huge failure of justice. It was one of the most humiliating episodes in Greater Manchester police history, but the fallout was just beginning. Chief Constable Mike Todd ordered an external inquiry. This brought in the Lancashire Police to investigate their colleagues' conduct. Their review confirmed everyone's worst fears. They found evidence of corruption, incompetence, and misconduct, which had infected the investigation from top to bottom. DCI Kenny Caldwell was the officer accused of lying and concealing evidence. He was suspended, but the worst part is that his suspension was quietly lifted months later. He was allowed to retire early, with his full pension intact, walking away from the wreckage without facing a single criminal charge. None of the other detectives involved were ever prosecuted, despite their overwhelming evidence of misconduct. The Crown Prosecution Service claimed there wasn't sufficient evidence to charge them. In the end, the only people punished were the public, left holding the bill for this expensive failure, and David Barnshaw's family, left without justice or closure. The killers had not only escaped conviction, but they had watched the entire system destroy itself trying to catch them. Now tell us, do you think the killers were smarter than the police? Or did corruption make sure they walked free? Share your opinion with us in the comments below. If you want to hear more shocking true crime stories just like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We have plenty more tales from the criminal underworld that will leave you speechless.